Everyone. My name is Dr. Rosalind Gregory Bass. I am the National President for the National Association for Minority Medical Educators. This organization was established in 1975 by a group of educators in response to the shortage of minority healthcare providers. Our primary focus and passion is in diversity and inclusion. And tonight is the beginning of a wonderful initiative that we would like to call ASK NAMME. The goal of tonight's talk and those that will follow is focused on how we, as a community, passionate about being able to increase the number of healthcare professionals of color, as well as increasing awareness and understanding of initiatives that impact a diversity of populations, how we can come together and have conversations around such subject matter as tonight's talk focused on the development and support of physicians in academia, as well as physician scientists and the training involved in that process in order to inspire and encourage future physician scientists. In the future, we hope to also have conversations about all of our various healthcare specialties, I should say, which would include dentistry. It would include nursing, physician assistant, also including such subject matter as public health, as well as mental health concerns, not only of the clients and patients that may be seen, but also that of healthcare professionals. We will, in the future, even have professional development sessions, being able to talk about how do we document the work that we do, and also us being able to have more conversations around conferences that we should be participating in, as well as other engaging policy reforms that will improve the work that we're doing on the front lines. So with that being said, I want to be able to say that tonight, not only will I be engaged as a moderator to be able to speak with our distinguished panelists, but also we have the executive director of the National Association of Medical Minority Educators, Ms. Felicia Keenan, who will be present. And also we will have our President-elect, Dr. Shelby Campbell. So without further ado, I would like to welcome you to our conversation this evening with ASK NAMME and with a focus on physicians in academia, as well as the making of a physician scientist, and how each of their roles are so impactful in us being able to overcome the shortage of minority healthcare providers. So our representatives this evening are representing BNGAP, the Building the Next Generation of Academic Physicians, and our guest is Dr. J.P. Sanchez. We also have representing the Student National Medical Association, one of our second-year medical students in an MD PhD program at Emory University, we have Jasmine Eatman. And representing APSA, the American Physician Scientists Association, we have Jose Rodriguez, who is currently in a DO PhD program at Michigan State. So, at this time, I would like for each of them to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background and how they have, I guess, really transitioned into becoming advocates for the specialties that they are in. So we will start with Dr. Sanchez.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure meeting everyone, and it's good being reconnected with friends from across the United States. I want to say special thanks to President Gregory Bass, President-elect Campbell, and Executive Director Keenan for considering BNGAP to be a part of this important panel. I can't wait for us all to come together. Dr. Bass had reminded me of our meeting a couple of months ago, and coming together and meeting in person, there's nothing that compares to that. So I really hope to be with the NAMME family in person soon again. I serve as the president for BNGAP, which is an organization dedicated to encouraging more diverse medical students and residents to become our future faculty and senior administrators. In my current role, I am an emergency medicine practitioner. I serve as the interim executive diversity officer at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine, and now as the executive associate vice chancellor for diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Health Sciences Center. As we talk about diversity, I identify as Puerto Rican. I shouldn't say I identify, I am Puerto Rican. I am Puerto Rican and proud Puerto Rican. Also identify as a gay man, born and raised in the Bronx, who happens now to be in New Mexico, and which is an incredible state to live in. So Dr. Gregory Bass, should I stop there to allow time for the co-panelists to introduce themselves, or?
Yes. Okay. Jose Rodriguez.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm Jose. I'm here at Michigan State. I'm a DO PhD trainee in our program. I'm 6 years in.
Okay, thanks. Talk to you later.
6 years in, and I'm also representing the American Physician Scientists Association. This year, I'm serving as our president-elect and then transitioning to the president of the organization. And APSA is really a trainee-led organization that supports physician scientist trainees. And we define that as anyone from undergraduate or before then all the way through junior faculty. And so we have around upward of 3,000 members now, and really trying to support folks to understand what the pathway is, whether that is pursuing a degree, an MD or DO degree, with or without that graduate training. And then again, to speak to diversity, I'm a biracial man. I'm a first-generation American. My folks are Portuguese and my father's Cape Verdean, which is a sort of small island off the coast of Senegal. No one knows where it is. But some nods, so that's like, this is the first crowd that people are like, yeah, Cape Verdean, we know what that is. So that's welcoming. Usually have to show a map or something. And before being president-elect, I was chair of our diversity ad hoc committee. And recently, that's something that I've been really passionate about and something that I want to focus our organization, sort of our ability to do resources in that capacity. And so I'm really excited to have been elected to president and to really have that as a strong focus in the coming years for APSA. So.
Thank you so much, Jose. Next, we'll hear from Jasmine Eatman.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine Eatman. Thank you so much, Dr. Bass, and so excited to be alongside such amazing panelists tonight. So I'm at Emory University in Atlanta in the MD PhD program, and I am a second year, very close to third year, almost there until we get back to campus. I guess I'm still second year. I just took step one yesterday. So I'm getting to M3 year, slowly but surely. And I've been in Atlanta for a while now. I went to Spelman College for my undergraduate training and actually did a dual degree program, which I earned my master's in neuroscience at Morehouse School of Medicine. So it was a whirlwind 5 years, got it all done. And was admitted to Emory, but decided to take a year to do some medical service work in Ecuador, where I lived for a year. I also am biracial. My mother is Colombian. My dad is Black American, and I really enjoy interacting with especially my brothers and sisters in the MD program at Emory. There are a good number of us. There are 35 of us in my class, which I think is incredible. But we, as a Student National Medical Association at Emory, really took seriously the fact that we wanted there to be more underrepresented students the next year than there were for us. And I'm really thankful that we were able to work together so well on that. I represented SNMA as president last year, where we implemented a lot of recruitment strategies. I'm really interested in the work, so I'm really excited to be here tonight. And we also did some advocacy work through Fulton County to pass a resolution to declare racism a public health crisis in the county, as well as in DeKalb County, where Emory is located. So it's been busy. I do study, I promise, but it's been really an awesome thing to kind of see what academic medicine even looks like in diversifying the field. So this is so cool to be here tonight, and I appreciate Dr. Bass for inviting me, and excited to get into the questions. And yeah, so thank you.
Well, let's hop right into them. And one of the first questions that I have is that so often many students aren't aware of all of the different things that they can do with a medical degree. We will see we have a diversity of individuals joining us as well. So I know it's ranging from pre-med students, current med students, and administrators. And so when we're talking to young people who are interested in the field, they'll say, oh, I want to be a doctor. I knew ever since I was 3. But very rarely do we hear a young person say, I want to be a physician scientist, or I want to use my medical degree to be in administration and be an academic physician. So my question to you is, what was that pivotal moment or set of experiences that helped you to know that this was going to be an option for you as a type of career? And we can start with Jasmine.
Awesome. So I do not think that there was a moment, right? I honestly don't. I think it's a cool story to be able to say yes, and it just dawned on me that I wanted to become a physician. I don't think that that is the case for me. I do know that I have always been very curious. I'm a very curious person. I just want to know what it is and why it is that way. And I think that I always saw science as a way to answer some questions that maybe I didn't even know I had, to follow through with something that I, am interested in, and to see a project to completion has always been very satisfying for me. And so I think the marriage of that curiosity and project oriented, and also obviously, as a physician, you want to help somebody who needs it, to be able to meet somebody in their moment of vulnerability, I think is a really powerful thing. And I come from a family of faith, and one who, my grandfather actually started a church. I was in that environment where I was seeing what it looked like really to just be in community work and to serve. And I think that that's so very much like medicine. It just also allows that scientific questioning, curiosity component. And so the marriage of all those things together makes me feel like I have a place in science and medicine, even though I don't even know what that is. And I don't even know if it's an it right now. I want to explore all of my options. I see my career as being dynamic. Even at the beginning of it, I see it that way. So I'm looking forward to finishing the MD PhD and going into maybe academia or practicing exclusively or doing more science. I do know I would love to be in policy, and I do see being a physician scientist. I think that I would be poised to do that in a way that I could be proud of and bringing something to bear. So those are, I guess, my thoughts when you ask me what my motivations are. They're growing, they're evolving constantly.
Thank you for that. Jose, would you like to share?
Yeah, I think for me, it was seeing folks doing it. And so, I I didn't say that I'm originally from the Boston area. I probably gave that away by saying I was Cape Verdean. That's where everyone is. But I'm originally from the Boston area, and I participated in this program called CURE, Continuing Umbrella for Research Experience, which is an awesome program, and it's with the um, diversity, inclusion, community partnership through Harvard Medical School. And so I did that as an undergrad, and I was actually paired with a physician scientist. And so he was an anesthesiologist, and our lab was at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and I got to shadow him in the OR doing anesthesia, but then he would come up and sit with us and talk about his research. And so that was a very awesome, another fellow CURE alum. Really cool. So that was really a transformative experience for me. And I was actually just really foundationally interested in doing research. I didn't think at the time that I wanted to do that until I started. I ended up having this opportunity to work at the Brigham as a newborn hearing technician. And for me, it was really about funds at the time, and then being able to work with patients and talk to people one-on-one. I realized that I love doing that, and being in that environment, and then thinking about what Dr. Farouk was doing day to day, being able to see patients and then do the research. Just seeing folks doing that, I thought was really important for me. So.
Awesome, thank you. And Dr. Sanchez, if you could share a little bit about what prompted you to want to have more of a role around teaching and research to complement your degree?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm much older than my distinguished co-panelists here. I went to medical school in the early 2000s. I think it was threefold. One, both of my parents taught in elementary school, and similar to many of us, I wanted to follow in their footsteps to some extent and honor them. Two, I am a product of pipeline programs. And I think whether it was my religious background or other influences, the responsibility of giving back as I have been supported is just foundational for me. And then I think thirdly was having several role models, one of them being Dr. Elizabeth Lee Ray, who was co-director of the Hispanic Center of Excellence at Albert Einstein, and her just saying, I want you to be a faculty member. And it was really such an important comment. I think Dr. Gregory Bass and I think other people have said that we have been often called and told that we're good enough to be physicians, but we simply do not tell our trainees that they are good enough and we need them to be the faculty and senior administrators. It's one of the most powerful things we can do. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take resources. It does take being genuine and sincere, because our trainees see it in our eyes and in the tone of our voice. But I think that's one of the first steps that we need to do as a community to really increase our representation. I would also say that I think I also grew up in a time where it wasn't about words, but action. And I think our students today and their calls for action against anti-racism and White Coats for Black Lives, they represent another generation who wants action now. But I think part of it is that if we want to see the change in representation, our students must become our faculty. It's not going to happen overnight. It's really going to happen if all of you decide to concurrently become our faculty. That 7% of your faculty will not change unless you step in and step up to be that representation. Yeah, got to give thanks to mom and dad.
Yes, I come from a family of educators too. So that's the running joke in the family, is that I went all science trying to escape, and here I am back in that same role. So they said it is in the blood. I think your comments are so timely because we were very strategic in making this the first Ask NAMME event. We know that in order to combat some of the challenges around access to the table, you must have individuals who have a global perspective, who have diverse perspectives, and can understand the stories of others who may have similar backgrounds as we're trying to really change some of the dynamics and really the demographic makeup of the current classes that we're seeing at the various health professional schools. So shedding light on being in these roles, I think will help others to think more broadly about what the opportunities are that exist. So we know in the past year that the pandemic has caused us to really think differently about all of our different careers and how we move and how we shape. But I wanted to ask you all, how do you think we need to be just mindful about the new responsibilities that may be upon us as educators, as admission committee representatives, as well as scientists and clinicians? And so for our audience, based on what you've seen in this past year, what do you think the new call will be for budding healthcare professionals that seek to be in academia or to be engaged in scientific discoveries? And we can start with Jose Rodriguez.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's an important question. It's a tough one too. And for me, I'm thinking about, our response. I just for some background too, I study infectious disease and outbreak response, and I think I saw on Twitter folks like Dr. Blackstock and others were calling the CDC to say that racism was a public health issue, and so I think that is a critical thing about how not only we address our patients in our individual communities, but these structural changes. And so I think continuing to have folks who are calling for broader structural change is really important from my perspective, because I think there's just our systems are inadequate to not only address, for example, an infectious disease, but also racism and how those diseases impact different people. So I think systems change, and also thinking about as educators and leaders, how do we teach physicians to be advocates, and also how do we teach physicians to either collaborate or really understand systems work to be able to make those changes or recommendations. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, if I could hear from Dr. Sanchez.
Like Jose, I also took a path of becoming an infectious disease researcher. So Jose will talk about that. But I think the commonality of osteopathic, allopathic schools, any health profession schools, is our role as educators. And I think that's why NAMME is such a critical organization. Not everyone in a medical school practices clinically, right? Not everyone does research, but what everyone does do is education. And as we think about, and as I reflect on when I was a medical student, a resident, a junior faculty member, and a senior faculty member, and in working with a number of organizations, I do think that we have to continue to be strategic to facilitate action. I think that sometimes my community verbalizes quite a bit what they would like to see happen. And I always try to move us to create actionable items, SMART goals and objectives to see the change, right? So I love when my students come in and share their thoughts and feelings, but I always set aside 30 minutes to say, how are we going to translate what you just said into an action? And action must be curriculum development. You must write the curriculum that you want in front of you. Otherwise, someone will tell your story in a way that you probably are not going to be comfortable or happy with. And then I got to sit through it and hear you say, I really didn't like how they spoke about my community. And I was like, oh, but we could have written the curriculum, right? And the same thing with policies and procedures. It's labor intensive, but I think in my current role and what I really appreciated in mentors is that every policy and procedure that exists in a medical school or residency program or on the university level was written by somebody. And we have to be that person. So I do make it a point of saying, we can talk for 30 minutes, but the other 30 minutes you have to write. That is my approach. And that is my one recommendation.
I totally agree. It is really about how do you create that narrative to bring about change. Absolutely. And Jasmine, do you have any thoughts around this topic in terms of what we should be thinking about moving forward, given the current challenges that we're seeing in terms of our role?
Yes, I do. I do. You know, I have thoughts, Dr. Beth. I think this is so important. It's something that Dr. Sanchez said that I was like, yes, yes, yes. This is the actionable items. I think that that is so important. You know, in you and Dr. Bass's work with students, I've been a recipient of that kind of mentorship, where you gotta say what it is that the goal is so that you can get to the goal, rather than just saying, you know, all the things that you would like to see happen. And I think that that same energy has to be implemented in student work that students do in the realm of advocacy. So even if it's not in the space of mentorship, which I think is so critical, I see that same process play out in the advocacy work that I've been engaged in thus far. As I was mentioning the resolution, that was a project that we brought to the Board of Commissioners of the county. And I was sitting here like, I don't know how to work with boards of commissioner members. Like, what is going on? How do you even do this? But it took doing the homework and looking at what is a resolution, what is the actual structure of it, how much can I fit in there, right? And you know, with the team, we worked on what it is that we want to see. We want to see the center for addressing these issues. We don't just want to declare something. We want to set up a scaffolding where we can follow up with you and make sure we can get Emory faculty to be talking about who will be appointed to the positions to carry out the you know, the points of the resolution. And I'm so proud of the work that so many of us put into that. And I think it's not that different from also being connected with our communities, where we're, you know, talking about these actionable items one-on-one, right? How can you take, you know, your health into your hands, right? As you know, my friend, as a medical student, right, I have the same responsibility to, you know, representing my community at school that I do, you know, to be there for the people in my community. So why, you know, we can talk about why is it that you don't want to get the vaccine? I think it's really important for us to discuss, you know, if you're gonna smoke hookah, I think you should be able to have, you know, a viral capsid in your arm. It's gonna be okay. You know, there are things that we have to be able to break down and talk about in a way that's very action oriented, because if not, I think, especially as and this is kind of bringing it to the close, what I'm trying to say is, this generation, as was mentioned, is really interested in action now and in seeing the results of our struggle. Because it has been a struggle, especially in the last few months, as we've been dealing with all of this trauma as it relates to racial justice, as it relates to health. The Black community has experienced a different level of that trauma, having been, you know, disproportionately impacted. And so if we don't work to educate and work to kind of get to the level of people who are interested in these issues, but maybe apprehensive, there will be resistance. And unfortunately, the resistance on parts of communities of color may be hesitancy to get a vaccine that may save their lives, right? Hesitancy to go to the doctor when it's important to do so. And I think I've seen that play out. And I know as I enter into my clinical years, I will see it play out more, but I want to be the kind of medical student, the kind of physician, the kind of mentor who will kind of have the conversations that will prevent any acts of resistance against the medical community that maybe I could have prevented by saying, you know, I'm here for you. I want to be able to not only be a physician in the community, but a friend. So these are just my thoughts on those questions and how we can move forward.
Thank you. And once again, great transition because you mentioned resolutions. And I know APSA is really requesting groups, their members, to focus on what are the resolutions that we can create that are action items for change. And so with that, I would love for each of you to talk more about the organizations that you're affiliated with and what are some of the current initiatives that they're doing to address health disparities, that they're trying to also increase support for students of color who are trying to gain access to the healthcare professions. And then specifically with BNGAP, just to talk about the role of the Academic Medicine Journal and how the collaboratives that have been set up, how you all have been able to really work together with just setting up a great infrastructure for young doctors as well as current administrators to share some of the great work that they're doing. So Jose, if you could share about that, the resolutions, and a little bit more about APSA.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I should say I'm just really honored to be here too, and I appreciate that. I think it. I'm really proud of our work so far, and so this invitation sort of spoke to that. And I think our latest and greatest, I guess, has been the virtual summer research program. And so this was actually, I'll tell you the little story behind it, was an undergraduate on one of our committees, our diversity ad hoc committee, which we've formalized as the Justice, Equity, and Diversity and Inclusion Committee on our executive council. So it'll be like a standing committee moving forward with the organization. And Brianna Macedo, she was an undergraduate and she had a summer research program, and a bunch of her friends had this summer research program canceled. Many of them were participating in things like CURE and others. And so she said, you know, we need a virtual thing, like we gotta do something. And I said, sure, you know, like next year. And she said, no, this year. So we made it happen. And I think one of the amazing things about APSA is that we have sort of some great members of our executive board and also some really rich collaborations. And so we connected undergraduates to faculty from all over the country to do one-on-one mentorship virtually, so a research experience. And so that was great. We had 158 undergraduates enroll in that program, 80% of which stated that they're going to continue doing virtual research with their mentor moving forward. And we really did just like grassroots sort of open sort of recruitment of mentorship through our membership as well as on Twitter and things like that. So I think we're trying to really build a robust program moving forward, collaborate better with faculty. And so that's something that we're thinking about, and we would love to have guidance, mentorship, and increased partnership with everyone on this call to really make that a strong program that folks know about. And we're not trying to replace any other program. I think it's really this thing that we're thinking about as a catch for folks who may have not gotten into other programs, may not be able to travel for research programs. They have this as an option. We also have a long-standing undergraduate mentorship program where we match undergraduates one-on-one with MD or DO PhD. This is like dual degree training. And so that's a year-long program where folks can just sort of chat one-on-one. And we also edit folks' statements and things like that. In general, APSA is here to try to um, uh, get the word out about physician scientist training. I'll admit that we do tend to, most of our members are dual degree trainings, MD or DO PhDs, and so our interactive sessions tend to be focused on that as well, on how to get into programs, what are the different programs, and some of the other careers. We also have a committee of residence fellows and junior faculty, and our FJF committee has been really active in trying to support that sort of group as well. And so we sort of see this attrition in the career path after you just did a bunch of training, either a physician, an MD or DO, or you did a dual degree program, you're in residency. How do you then transition into fellowship or then become a junior faculty member? And so they're putting together a lot of support in terms of interactive sessions, and also within our regional meetings, things like that, trying to bolster that membership. So yeah, happy to take any recommendations, questions about what we're doing. And I'd say that it's really about my perspective from this work was I read this paper called Ladders of Citizen Participation. And so getting people just asking undergraduates, what do you think that we need? What do you think as an organization we can do? And so giving them the empowerment to achieve that with our resources as an organization. So a little long-winded, but
No, it's helpful, especially for people who aren't familiar with APSA. I would love to hear from Jasmine about SNMA. We were fortunate enough to have the national president at our national meeting share a little bit about the initiatives. But if you could even expound on how has it helped you as a student, as well as if they have support for students in dual degree programs like yourself.
Yes, so I will definitely speak to some of the things that we're doing. And I also, as I mentioned, I was the president last year of the chapter at Emory, but this year I'm the MD PhD liaison. So that's kind of cool. So far, as the chapter has developed more, and I'm not going to expand too much more on the resolution because I've said a lot about it, but we were just reached out to by a Georgia state legislator who's interested in implementing some, hopefully looking at the resolution and seeing what we can build as connecting between Georgia's governor. She's like the Georgia state legislation representative. And so she's working with the governor on different initiatives. So we're going to keep pursuing that. But I think what's really awesome about our SNMA chapter is that it takes very, very seriously the fact that we are in the Atlanta community. So looking at how do we not only connect with other medical schools here, we have a great relationship with Morehouse School of Medicine, but we also are going into the community into elementary schools, where we are on panels for Spelman's MAPS and Georgia State's MAPS, and doing different community service projects through Love Beyond Walls and other awesome Atlanta-based initiatives. So I'm very proud of that. It's cool to have kind of heavy hitter, high reaching work, but being in the community and being a community member to me is the most important thing. And I also am really excited about something that one of the faculty members, Dr. Tracy Henry, did with SNMA is that she's an amazing mentor, one of my dearest mentors. She created a program called the Impact Program, and it's all about mentoring students of color, but really making it integrated vertical mentorship. So she has you paired up with, if you're an M1 and I was an M1, paired up with an M2 and an M3 and an M4 and an intern and a resident. So you have that, and an attending. So you have that whole kind of lineage of mentorship that you can reach out to at any time. And I take advantage of that so often. And I'm so thankful that she decided to do that. And it was really special because it brought for us kind of that mentorship that we may not have being students of color, not in our families, maybe not being able to reach out, hey, you know, my physician uncle, or, you know, can you tell me about how to register for step one? You know, it may not be that we have, but we do have awesome faculty members who make accessible that mentorship to us. So I think that those are some of the initiatives that I say I'm really proud of. As far as the MD PhD program, and I've said this to Emory's face, so I'm not talking behind anybody's back, but Emory, as a medical school, I think has worked, you know, hard to diversify. The MD PhD program has a long way to go. And last year there was not one Black matriculant, not one. And, you know, I was very vocal about that, as I'm sure you may be able to tell. But I think, you know, what's more important at this place is not being kind of critical to the institution beyond the point of being able to work with them and develop some initiatives there. So I'm working with the DEI folks in the program, hopefully to recruit more faculty of color so that students in the program and those who are not yet in the program can see themselves, as Dr. Sanchez and Jose mentioned, because that's really key. We don't want to bring students into a space that's traumatizing either. And so we're working at all those levels. I'm really thankful that I'm in a space where I feel like I can engage to the extent that I really feel like I need to complement my education. But yeah.
Dr. Sanchez?
Yes, so I think BNGAP offers similar stuff, right, to what Jasmine shared about SNMA and what Jose mentioned about APSA. As mentioned, the mission of BNGAP is to encourage diverse trainees, in particular women, underrepresented racial, ethnic minorities, and LGBT individuals who are trainees, the medical students, the residents, the fellows, the college students, to become our future faculty and administrators. We focus on pre-faculty development, right? That's very unique in creating a space where you can be who you are, be passionate about serving your community, and be valued. And I think the one thing that APSA, SNMA, and many of our organizations afford is networking, right? And so on this call today, you know, I noticed Dr. Dixon is on, and Dr. Campbell, and Dr. Davis. And I think the one thing that we hope to do through BNGAP is connect trainees with those senior leaders. And I tell you all the time, and Jose and Jasmine, I want you to come to my school and be my faculty and aspire to become a dean, right? I want you to apply to UNM or wherever I'm at, because I've been at 3 institutions, but know that we want you to be our faculty. You could stay at Emory. You know, I don't want anyone calling me up being nasty on the phone, but know that you're a hot commodity. And so I think that's very much about the networking that we do around pre-faculty development. I think the big innovation that BNGAP is currently focusing on is increasing institutional capacity to promote pre-faculty development. So we launched a National Center for Pre-Faculty Development that has 25 inaugural members, including SNMA and Marshall, Dr. Campbell's shop. So I have to give a special shout out to Dr. Campbell. And the whole idea is to enhance our offerings to our trainees so that they develop the knowledge, the skills, the experiences to make them more competitive, to get that first faculty position in an equitable manner, right? Because we know that women are shortchanged per dollar. We know that women and URM are not afforded the same titles or FTE or other resources to succeed. So we're really trying to address that from your first contract, right? And give you those knowledge, skills, and experiences. The other big piece of the National Center of Pre-Faculty Development is to call for our medical schools to have assistant deans, vice chancellors of pre-faculty development, similar to what we have faculty development. and incorporate that into their strategic plan and utilize SMART competencies. So that is what we are working on with our 25 members, because if it's not in the strategic plan, if there's not metrics, it doesn't happen. It's all smoke and mirrors. And so I think, you know, that is what I've learned in a lot of different things. And then lastly, in typing to publications, it is of the utmost importance that whatever we do, we write it up and try to publish it. I think one of the things that I mentioned when I was a medical student, there were 3 medical education journals: Teaching and Learning in Medicine, Medical Education, and Academic Medicine. Today, there's probably over 50 journals that you could publish your work in. And the 2 journals that I serve in an editorial capacity, the Journal of Academic Medicine and Medit Portal, both have been sincere about wanting more DEI content. If you look at the December issue of Academic Medicine, it focused on anti-racism, and it is an incredible collection of articles. And you could submit original research, or you could submit a letter to the editor that's 400 words, or a perspective or commentary that's 1,000 words. So there's a lot of different article types that you could take advantage of. You don't need to do a study for 5 years to have a publication. A letter to the editor is 400 words, and you could share what it's like to just be you or what your community is struggling with. And then Medit Portal also has a DEI collection. And, you know, just 2 recent examples of work that you could consider that you're probably working on. Dr. Oh my God, I'm blanking on her name. Dr. Pardo from SUNY Downstate, and the Associate Dean from New York Medical College, who's now a chair of OBGYN at Downstate, who I'm blanking on her name, and I'm so in trouble. Dr. Gregory Bass, can anyone help me out?
I can see your face.
Oh,
I'm your face. I just
so much trouble, but we just completed and submitted an article on Haitian American health, access, historical perspectives, and that's currently under review in Medit Portal. And all the co-authors, except for me, are Haitian American and wrote about their community. And then we just completed a medical Spanish module on talking to patients about PrEP in Spanish. So I share those 2 examples because historically that content was never invited. In fact, it was often rejected from day one. And I think Dr. Gregory Bass and myself and you know, people who went to medical school a while ago remember that. But today it's all, you can't use that excuse. People want it. Now it's all about writing, and there's definitely a lot of different spaces. And when you publish, you develop a niche, you become more competitive for your first job. And now if you don't publish, almost it becomes harder to have a convincing elevator speech. So yeah, I hope that gives you a little bit more about BNGAP and where we're going.
Yes, I so appreciate that information because I think that for me, it truly was in the mentorship, the research mentors that guided me. I remember being in grad school before I went to med school, and they said, you know, we have someone who's working on a study that we know is going to get published. Would you like to participate in that? And at first I was like, I've got so much work to do on my own project. But then I got the look from him and I was like, no worries, I'm going to count nuclei on different myofibers, no problem, no problem. But that really got the ball rolling for me and allowed me to continue to position myself that if there were opportunities to fully take advantage of them. And so I have been putting in the chat a number of different resources as you all have been speaking, links to your organizations. Also had to do a shout out for NAMME. We have a journal as well that individuals could publish in, the Journal of Best Practices in Health Professions Diversity. And next month's ASK NAMME, we will end up having that editorial board to come speak so that individuals who want to be able to learn more about that process for getting published in that journal, we're inviting you to come back. And thank you so much for everything that you shared regarding BNGAP and the initiatives to make sure that our young budding academicians are going to have the tools necessary in order to be looked upon during the selection process, because we know how rigorous that can be in scrutinizing when individuals are applying for faculty positions, that we're giving them the tools necessary to be competitive. I know that for many individuals, even though our program goes to 7:30, they may have to leave soon. And so, Ms. Keenan, if you could please share some of the questions that are in the chat so that they will be able to get their questions answered before they have to jump off. Is there anybody, or do you have questions that we can field?
We have a brief list at the moment. So the first question, for becoming an educator in this field, was there any other skills outside of medicine that you needed to develop so that you would give your students your best in teaching?
And anyone can answer that.
I guess I can quickly, I am a student of medicine right now, but I was actually teaching at Morehouse College this past summer through their summer program, Upward Bound. Their Upward Bound summer program. I was a neuroscience instructor. And so these were college or high school students about to apply to college. And I will say something that I mentioned before, just very quickly. I think that I really am thankful for the time that I spent with them, just really getting to know them, speaking with them about things that I don't know if it was me, but they were so open to share with me some of the things that were preventing them from getting to the space where they felt like they could really understand neuroscience, because neuroscience is a very elusive, people are like, oh, neuroscience. I don't know why people feel that way. I think it's pretty cool. But a lot of times, you know, especially when and these were students who are coming from, you know, less advantaged backgrounds or alternatively advantaged backgrounds, but definitely not at a financial advantage. So there were some things that we had to talk about, like, why do you think that it is? Why does this seem beyond you? Like, let's discuss what that looks like. And, you know, to be more clear about what I think I needed first was I really was thankful for the time that I spent in my master's program, where sometimes I didn't feel like I could get the information. Like, I felt like, oh my gosh, this may be beyond me. So I think the challenge of attaining the information myself, and I know that's something that all teachers need to go through in order to teach, but being in that place where you may not feel like you have command of the information, and that being so recent for me, I think was really helpful in my attempt to teach and to lead them through the information. So I hope that was clear, but it's my small.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I guess I could add, I think one thing that, you know, that I think about a little bit is, you know, if I go to teach a class, like there are spaces at MSU, of course, to do sort of advanced training in teaching as a graduate student. But then also getting a DO degree and being a physician, I'm not going to go through that process myself. But then if I go to teach later on, I do hope that there are additional opportunities for things like, you know, backward design and syllabus creation and things like that. I think that's might be important for like young faculty development. But yeah, I think that you know, just thinking about, I don't, you know, I think it's extra. It's always extra, something that you have to sort of seek out for yourself versus a requirement. You know, creating a syllabus and thinking about a curriculum versus just having to TA that, you know, micro lab that I had to do. So.
Thank you.
I think the only thing I would add is evaluating generational differences, especially as you do DEI work, and realizing that I think it is sometimes frustrating for students, current graduate students, to hear comments made by faculty. And similarly, it's hard for faculty to sometimes understand the perspective of students. And there is generational difference. It's important to consider it, and not assume that people just have to understand what you're saying because you're speaking. I think if you're really trying to help people progress, it requires time, and deconstructing and changing the way people think, whether it's conscious or unconscious bias, doesn't happen in 1 hour. It doesn't happen in one exercise. It's ongoing dialogue and discussion. And I think it's important to give people, to be grateful when people can even come together in the same room and just listen as a first step. For me, I think that's the most important thing as you try to teach when you're dealing with different generations.
Hands down, because as a Gen Xer taught by baby boomers, it was either you get it or you don't. But now I can truly appreciate what it is that you're saying, because if the goal is for us to reach a certain mark and for us to, hello? I was going to say that if the role is for us to truly be able to get everyone to that finish line or to that benchmark, we're going to have to be creative. We're going to have to be patient. And we're going to have to be able to, as you say, listen more than we speak, to help us as a collective. I think that that's just very, very important. And in a time such as this, we're already having conversations about post-pandemic disparities as it relates to the virtual education that students are receiving. There's a great article that was just put out, even looking at private school and public school differences during the pandemic. And I think that as we're looking at K through 12 and those that will soon populate into the undergraduate space, that we're going to really have work to do to make sure that students will be able to overcome some of the challenges they face during this time period. So Ms. Keenan, do you have another question for us?
Yes. After we are able to foster interest in academic medicine or physician research, any advice about recruiting to schools that are struggling with diversity?
Recruitment advice. I know, Jasmine, you spoke on that earlier in terms of interventions that you were trying to, or at least bringing awareness to what felt comfortable and didn't feel comfortable about the next year's class and the lack of diversity that was present. Are these similar conversations that you are having with your colleagues at other institutions? And, I'm just curious, since I know you had mentioned it earlier.
Yes, yeah, I definitely did. Definitely want to give room for anyone who wants to add to this. And I just would echo what I mentioned before, which is that you don't want to bring students into a space that's traumatizing. We had several really difficult conversations just around what that looks like in the MD PhD program at Emory. And in speaking with the director, I want to be just as transparent as I am when speaking with my friend or my family member about the frustration. But I know, having been raised, up through Spelman and keeping my professional, air about me, I want to make sure that I convey how critical it is that you set the space up for students to thrive before they enter in without losing my sanity too. I think that it's really important that institutions, while they're thinking about recruiting faculty or thinking about recruiting students of color, more students of color, that they be really mindful about the way that they treat their current students of color and the work that they ask us to do in setting the space up to expand diversity. And what I mean by that is I served on a panel where, it was for underrepresented students in medicine, and the Office of Multicultural Education actually paid us, and it was like, that's not what I don't need. I don't need that. I'm not going to ask for it. Right. But I think it was a really important gesture. And I know that it was thoughtful because they know how much, we're medical students, we're studying, we're working, right. But they recognize that it is of value what we bring to the table. And so I know that a lot of times institutions with white leadership or leadership who is just not diverse in any sense leans heavily on those who are already there, whether it be faculty or students of color. And although that makes sense, logically, it's important to also value it, in action, whatever that means for the institution itself. I hope that makes sense.
Any other thoughts on that?
I was
So,
just gonna say, go ahead, Dr.
No,
Sanchez,
please,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna, echo that. I think that, you spoke on it so eloquently, and, it speaks to that minority tax at specific institutions. Just be on this panel, take this picture, do this thing. So I think, valuing people's time and effort that they put into that. And I think it kind of goes to that. I think it was Alexis Green's question. They're asking about, should I go to somewhere and change things? And, I think that's so important and bold, but I also think I feel like a lot of people feel like this is their responsibility when they're training. And the dual degree program is hard. You have to do, and your training comes first. And I think that you need to do it and have that value of saying, this is training for yourself. And the beautiful thing about a PhD is it is really about gaining skills that will make you a scientist. And so taking that time and carving it out, and then knowing that everything you do beyond that is extra, even reaching down or back to your own community, not down, but back to your community, I think is important. But primarily, getting your education and doing it well, and moving forward through that education, I think is really important. And then hopefully your institution values everything you do on top of that.
Yeah, I would. I was just gonna. That's an excellent question, and I think this is fundamental to what medical schools are challenged with right now. And I think that Jasmine and Jose have brought up excellent points and examples of how other medical schools are dealing with recruitment. In my older generation lens, the two things that I've been concerned about that I think is reflected in the report on altering the course of Black men in medicine has been where I think we dropped the ball in DEI work, which has been evaluation. And we could have a lengthier discussion about that. You can't run an ICU and kill patients or have more people die than survive. You can't be a thriving business with selling fewer products every year. But it took a trend of 40 years where the number of African-American men in medical school was going down to create a report saying 40 years later, there's fewer Black men in medicine than 40 years ago. So what always struck me about that report was, what was everyone looking at every year for 40 years? And do we still even know what works and what doesn't work from an evaluation perspective? The struggle of DEI has been, I feel like in part, a lack of evaluation. Now, can it be bias as one factor? Absolutely. And discrimination? Yeah. But I think, unfortunately, That has been around since my birth, and unfortunately that will be a fight till I die, and probably till all of us die. And it's really multifactorial. The work that I think we're all called to do won't often be compensated with money. For me, I never expected to always be paid because it was a matter of survival. And if I didn't do it, I might not survive or thrive. So I would caution, the balance between, I think Jose and Jasmine brought up some really important points about how do you balance serving with your own personal, professional, and academic well-being. And I think that is an important consideration for the current Generation Z, because I think the change will, like on many of us who are older and have borne the weight and the tears and the wrinkles, there will be continued sacrifices, but it's so important. It's not a tax, it's building capital. And now we're in a better place than ever to command minority capital. And I think we need to try and figure out how to do that without sacrificing our personal well-being.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will just add, I believe that was, I was trying to see the name, but when it came to this question that we've been discussing, I just wanted, Dr. Sanchez, if you could, given the role that you're in, what do you think is going to be a best practice for someone who's actually finishing their MD, PhD program? Number one, do you think should they do a postdoc? And then two, when it comes to applying to institutions that have less diversity, what would be some of the recommendations you would have? So just as someone who is freshly graduating from their MD, PhD program, and if they're desiring to gain an academic position, what would be 3 things you would tell them to be able to make those connections?
I'm an educational researcher, but not a benchwork researcher. So I would connect them immediately with a good friend and a co-board member of BNGAP, Dr. Dennis Spencer, who just signed his contract at Harvard, at Boston Children's Hospital. And he is the only African-American faculty member within his department of Peds GI. I would connect with Dr. Spencer for both of those roles. And having known Dr. Spencer for a very long time, I think that, and I think this is uniform, you have to be clear on what you want to be hired to do and be known for. Whether it's education, research, or clinical work, you have to write out what you want your job responsibilities to be, your metrics, what you want to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think that builds self-efficacy and confidence. Then you want to search for positions that match what you hope to be known for, what your responsibilities and metrics, because that's a better relationship. You are joining a department where you're going to have a relationship with the chair and everyone else in the department. And you really got to be critical about it. Sometimes we hope that a department wants us, but sometimes it's just not meant to be, because what they need to hire isn't what you're looking for. And the department may be stellar, but they're just not stellar for you. And that's hard to accept, right? It's like any relationship. And I think we've all been in this situation where our parent are like, what's wrong with that person? They're attractive, they're great on paper, why isn't it a match? And I'm like, it's just the chemistry isn't there, it's not gonna align, right? So that's the first thing. It starts with you. You have to figure out what you need personally, professionally, academically, and then find the department that is gonna work for you. Sometimes we make sacrifices because we don't want to leave a certain neighborhood or region. But the problem with that is the department that you're trying to be hired by, they may not have a position, and they may not want you because they need someone in ultrasound, or they need someone with a different skill set. And it's not because you're not bright, it's not because you're not valuable, it's just that department needs something different to move forward. They may have someone similar enough to you. So don't take it personal. I think in terms of whether you join a department with a large URM population or a non-existent URM population, which is many departments across this country, it starts with you again. What do you need? And having that critical reflection on, in this current journey, are you gonna feel comfortable? Even though there's no URM people, do you feel like there's an openness to understand your perspective and your journey? Do you feel like they will connect you with people in other departments? Often I didn't find URMs in my department, but I found them in OBGYN, I found them in IM, I found them in psychiatry, or I found them in schools nearby. And that's equally valuable to find like-minded individuals. So I think those are the considerations. And it has to fit with you. You write down why you made this decision, because 6 months into it, you might hit some rough points where you're like, oh my God, why did I choose this job? And it's important to reflect on your list so you know you did the right thing, right? And that you don't double guess yourself, because that can be devastating. So those are just some of my experiences. I've worked in white majority institutions, and I've worked in minority majority institutions, and both of them were equally hard for many reasons. So there's no given just because you go to a school with a large URM population, just FYI.
Great points, Dr. Sanchez, great points. I think we have time for 2 more questions and 1 response. And I'll just ask the panelists if they see a question that resonates with them in the chat, if they could just put a response in, that would be great, just to make sure that we are addressing those. And I've also saved the chat, so I'll be able to get back in touch with those of you just to make sure that we're able to address all of those questions. Ms. Keenan, do we have 1 or 2 more? If not, if we've missed her, just want to highlight, we have a student, Miss Alexis. She says she's a junior biochemistry major applying to MD PhD program this year. She says, if I see that a school has very few Black matriculants, like you said about Emory, should I be turned off to go there or more motivated to go there in order to help diversify the program and advocate, even though I may be shut down or talked over? So Jasmine, if you could just speak quickly to this question.
Absolutely. I was looking at that one. I wanted to give it some thought, and I have. It's really important, and I say this with love, that you don't anticipate getting shut down, because I think even though it may be likely that someone may attempt to do so, it's really important not to anticipate that. And I think as we enter into spaces where we may not be the majority, I hate the word minority, so I try not to use it, but where we may not be the majority, going in with the confidence to know that you're supposed to be there, that no one, just brought you in from the street. You did your work. You've entered into the space. Thank God that we have been afforded the opportunity to apply and to enter in. I was actually, quick anecdote, I was studying at the school recently, and one of the the building workers was in one of the study rooms, and I went in. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Let me look for another room. It's all good. And he said, no, come in here and do your work. An older Black gentleman. And I said, no, really, it's fine. And he said, look, when I came here to Emory 25 years ago, the only Black people in here were those working the buildings. So I'll sit out. He said, I swear, he said, I will sit out in the rain if I have to. You come in here and you get your studying done. And that was an awesome reminder to me that there is no one who is supposed to be in these spaces more than we are. And so I'll say that to here on the panel, I'll say this is my director's face. I know I'm supposed to be where I am. So it's really important that we go in there with that sense of confidence. I won't belabor the point, but saying that, believing that, then allows you to do as much or as little in the way of increasing diversity as you want to. And I think it's really important what Jose was saying, what Dr. Sanchez was saying, is that it is not no one's requiring you to do so. The labor of love is real, and it does require work and intentionality, but you measure out however much you see. It's not about going in order to diversify. It's about going to shine, to work hard, and that opens the door itself. As much, as Jose wonderfully said, as much else as you want to do is additional to that. And I think it's important, as Dr. Sanchez said, that we do it, but being mindful is also something I've tried to do, so.
Great. Thank you for that. You took me back to my Wisconsin days in Madison. I was the only person of color in a building that to me at the time seemed as big as the White House. It was huge. But you have those moments where you have to have that confidence in knowing that you have just a right to be in the space as anybody else. And it's those moments where you do have those cheerleaders that sometimes you don't even know or they're cheering for you, but that reminds you that the path has already been paved. So I want to have one more question that I see, and I wanted to acknowledge Carrie Woodbury. I think I saw she had mentioned the point about MCAT scores as a barrier, and so that's a whole nother conversation. We're going to probably have a session just on standardized tests and strategies to help students succeed and overcome that. We have a liaison from AAMC, Brandon Hunter, who is working with NAMME's National Board, and we want to be able to definitely address that because standardized tests can be a challenge for our students who are interested in going to health professional school and specifically MD PhD programs or DO PhD programs. The last question that I see here that we'll be able to address for tonight is from I believe that's Miss Baker. And it states, any financial advice concerning affording education and personal responsibilities without loans? And so if Jose could answer this for us, especially as it relates to dual degree programs, and then what, if you're open to sharing your undergraduate experience as it relates to whether loans were necessary or not. And if anyone else wants to chime in the chat around this or know of resources or scholarships, NAMME offers scholarships for students. But we want to definitely make sure that we reserve our last bit of time to answer this question. So Jose?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so I think the great thing about dual degree programs is much of them are funded. You get a small stipend, and really that's about being, it would be financially unfeasible to sustain an 8-year education and not have a stipend. Some of them you do have to pay a small bit of tuition, and so MSU, unfortunately, the DO PhD program, I am paying a bit of tuition, so taking out a very small fraction of loans over the course of my 8 years. And I did have a lot of scholarship at Northeastern. I went to Northeastern University in Boston. I did have a lot of scholarship there. I was an RA, which helped with housing, and then I did take out some small loans. So at the end of everything, I think I'll have the same amount, or just under the average amount of medical debt that an average medical student acquires over their course of their 4 years, with my 5 years at Northeastern and my 8 years at MSU. So yeah, that is definitely a consideration. I've been thinking about it. I actually just sold my first home too, which was really nice. So financially, okay there, and being able to make, this is something that I thought of when I went to Northeastern. I was, working, doing co-ops to pay for medical school, and then have the nice thing about our program is we do have financial literacy when we enter our program. We have a 2-hour session from the econ department about financial literacy and financial aid. And so I think that was really important. And then considering the fact that you're going to be in the same spot for years at a time if you're able to, property and things like that. So Lansing, Michigan is, I just said sold a home, but it's very different than Atlanta or where I was from Boston. The nice thing about also the physician scientist pipeline, I think, is that is sort of, or the pathway rather, the career path, is that there's a lot of these sort of grant timelines and things that you can apply to your F award. There's to get to you to that R01, right? And one of those is the NHLPR, the loan repayment program. And so a lot of physician scientists end up applying to that program, physician educators. And so I think that is something to think about. I'm also really interested in service. And so thinking about a career at the CDC or FDA, and they have loan repayment options as well. So it's definitely something that I'm kind of bummed about, that I do have to pay tuition, other than some MD, PhD programs or MSTP programs, which are NIH funded. But there are some options, especially since I'm service driven. I think I'll be able to get that repaid in the future, hopefully.
Great. I was busy putting all the information in the chat, and I see some other people may be doing the same thing. I'm a recipient of one of those NIH loan repayment grants, and it was just extremely beneficial since I was married and had my daughter my second year of med school. So we did need to take out a little bit more for daycare and some other things. But even where you're in school, where I was in Madison, they had grants for childcare and other resources to support individuals who had families. I was just about to put the link in for the National Health Service Corps, which is around service and working in underserved areas. And there are some hospitals for your various your first jobs in rural or urban communities. Sometimes those hospitals will actually go into a loan repayment contract with you, where you work with them for 5 years, and then they'll pay your student loan debt. So it is a real question, and one that I know students have been asking, and we want to make sure that they receive the correct information so that they're going to be financially healthy by the time it's all over. And I still think, even despite the increase in costs, that most healthcare professionals have been able to manage their debt load in a decent amount of time, in order to make sure that they still have the lifestyle that they were hoping to have. So, but a financial advisor, planner, that's also very good too. So I think that may even be a follow-up session that we could have, to be able to share with individuals best practices, and maybe even contract negotiation, which is a common question I'm hearing about hearing from some of our young professionals who are just graduating from their residency program. So with that being said, it is now 7:26. I want to thank each and every one of you who have participated this evening. A special thanks to our panelists, and if you could just thank them in the chat for their wise words and feedback and perspectives around academic medicine, as well as dual degree programs. We know that this is not an easy road, but it is so worthwhile, and it is so impactful as it relates to what it is that we're trying to do to make sure that we occupy all spaces in order to bring about positive change for the communities that we serve. So without further ado, thank you to our NAMME members who joined us this evening. If you're not a NAMME member, we are asking that you go to our website and consider being a member. We have 3 other organizations that were represented today. We have BNGAP, we have APSA, as well as SNMA, and there is a LMSA. So we want you to also make sure that you look into that organization too, to make sure that you're taking full advantage of all resources available as you're going along your journey to becoming a health professional. And for all our administrators who I know are standing in the gap, it is truly a labor of love. If there is any initiative that you want us to co-sponsor with you at your institutions, or if you would like to host an Ask NAMME webinar or workshop, please let us know. Just reach out to us. I'm at rbass@spelman.edu. And if Felicia is still with us, would love for her to put her email there, but I also put the link in that contact information for on our website is there if you want to co-sponsor an event together. So with that being said, look forward to a survey coming your way to give us feedback. And we ask that all of you be safe during this time, and God bless.